It was a quiet college town until one freezing November morning, 4 University of Idaho students were found brutally stabbed in their own home. No forced entry, no suspects, no clear motive. The killer vanished into the night, but left one chilling clue behind: a knife sheath tucked beside a victim's body. What followed was a nationwide manhunt, a mysterious white Elantra, and a suspect who studied how to get away with murder. This is the case of the Idaho college murders. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of A Brush with Death. I'm your host, Miss Casey Hanalei, and in this series I sit down and I tell you a true crime story, and I usually paint you or draw you a pretty picture at the same time. So if you love true crime and you love art, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you will never miss one of my terrible yet hopefully inspirational stories. Also comment and like, because that helps a lot too. Please. I'm trying to grow my channel, and it's growing slowly, and oh, that's my doggy, Odie. Shaking about. Hi, Odie. It's growing slowly, but it's a lot of work, guys. It's a lot of work. Anyways, so you may notice that I don't have my easel here to show you any of my pieces or have a special guest for this video. I'm pretty sure I ran out of pieces, guys, so I'm just going to have no guest until maybe if someone wants to collab with me and come sit behind me and react while I'm talking, that would be cool. But we're not going to have any more of my pieces join me unless I do something new. I will definitely place it here, but no pieces today. Sorry, guys. So what are we talking about today? We are talking about the Idaho college murder case. And there was just a development in the trial for this, or lack thereof a trial. So this is a very recent one. Let's get into the details, guys. So this case just happened a few years ago in 2022. Does anybody remember this on the news? This is when we were like starting to come out of COVID, right? Some people were still at home. This was at the University of Idaho. 4 students were brutally murdered and stabbed to death. So let's get into the actual, murder night, and then we'll kind of like go back from there. So the night of the murders, November 12th and 13th of 2022, students of, University of Idaho, Ethan Chapin and Xana Kernodle returned from a Sigma Chi party around 1:45 a.m. Their roommates, Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogen, they were coming home from the corner club, and they had grabbed food around 1:41 a.m. and were returning around the same time, around 1:56 a.m. So all the roommates are kind of getting home around the same time, out doing, what college students do, is going out at night and coming back in and getting up early the next day, right? So obviously they didn't know what was going to happen. So that night, the morning of the 13th, between 4 and 4:25 a.m., investigators believe that all 4 were lethally stabbed while asleep. And some of them did have defense wounds, so some of them may have woken up while the others were, being stabbed. So not much is known about what order things went in, what actually happened. We'll see that there's not going to be an actual trial as well, and the perpetrator hasn't really given us any details as far as like what happened either, so not much is known. However, we do have an affidavit from one of the surviving roommates, known as DM. She woke up around 4 a.m. What she thought were, just people being noisy, some of her roommates. So she got up, But she said later that it was possibly crying from one of the victims' rooms. She couldn't really understand what was going on, so she got up and was listening, and she heard a male voice say something like, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." So I don't know if that was our perpetrator or if that was maybe one of, maybe Ethan saying, so I don't know who it was, but she opened her door and saw a masked man dressed in black walking towards her. She said that he had bushy eyebrows and was about 5'10", and walked past her and out back the sliding glass door from where he came. Or at least she assumed he came. So why didn't she say anything? Well, she said that she was frozen in shock and she had locked herself in her room and did not call 911. So, from the outside looking in, you're like, why didn't you call 911 at least? But I don't know if you've ever been, especially if you're a woman, if you've ever been in that type of situation and you're just freaking terrified, give her a little bit of a break. She probably was just absolutely, frozen, right? Like she said. But again, try to get the energy and the wherewithal to at least call 911. So no one called 911 until late in the morning the next morning, which was the 13th, right? So a call was placed around 11:58 a.m. on November 13th, 2022. The call came from inside the house, but it was not made by either of the two surviving roommates directly. Instead, it was placed by a friend who had been called to the scene after the roommates were freaking out and alarmed by the situation, and they were unable to wake up one of the victims. So again, I think they're probably in shock, right? So it's hard to know what should have been done if you're not in that situation, right? So let's not, pass down too much judgment on these survivors. The dispatcher was told that there was an unconscious person at the home. When police arrived, they discovered the horrific scene and determined it was a homicide involving 4 victims. Why was there such a delay in the reporting of the deaths? There have been significant public confusion and speculation and scrutiny about the timeline. Many people didn't understand why no one freaking called the police. But according to investigators, the surviving roommates were likely asleep or unaware of the extent of what had actually happened, possibly due to shock or not having directly witnessed the killings. It wasn't until later that morning that they realized something was actually really, really wrong. So around noon that day, that's when police responded to a call about an unresponsive person. That's when all 4 victims were found stabbed in their sleep. And this is when the knife sheath is found. That's hard to say, knife sheath. Say that 5 times fast. The autopsies confirm the deaths during sleep and multiple stab wounds, possibly defensive wounds, and no sexual assault. So that rules out that type of motive. And spoiler alert, we never really find out what the actual motive was, which is just infuriating. I mean, does it make it worse? Yeah, I think so. I mean, like in Scream, what's scarier is a bad guy with no motive. So, who knows what the killer was thinking. So between November 15th and the 30th, evidence was being gathered, and there's a lot of public involvement as well. So police indicate an edged weapon was used and acknowledged it was a targeted attack. They also ruled out the surviving roommates too, so they are cleared and not on the suspect list. Authorities seek video footage via tip lines, and they received thousands of tips and submissions. There was a surveillance video that did capture a white Hyundai Elantra circling the house near murder time. I'm laughing because I used to own one of those. Hyundais are pretty good cars. You know, they're pretty cheap and worth money. Anyways, so they track down this Elantra, and they find that the license is between 2011 and 2013. So they're kind of narrowing down their search of this vehicle, right? And if we find the owner of the vehicle, maybe we will find the killer. So there's a few other things found at the scene. Obviously, the knife sheath, and there was blood on this. So there was DNA collected from this sheath from a military-style K-bar, I think that's how you say it, knife, was found at one victim's body. It held male DNA that didn't match any direct profile, but triggered a familial match in public DNA databases. So maybe it wasn't blood. Maybe it just had some kind of, epithelials or something from the killer's fingertips, and they nabbed a DNA sample. So they took that DNA, and using that match, investigators traced it to Kohberger, which is our killer. They confirmed the DNA. They had, the profile all ready to go, and they had the Hyundai Elantra footage. They traced it back to Kohberger, and to confirm that it was his DNA, they stalked his father's house and grabbed a Q-tip from the trash, and through familial DNA, they made a match to Kohberger. So there was also surveillance and phone data as well. So the white Elantra was photographed multiple times near the crime scene, and this is how they got his name. His phone was also inactive during the time of the murders and then reappeared nearby later. So he turned it off, committed the murders, ran away, and turned it back on, and they can see that all through cell phone records. He was also pulled over in Indiana in December, so the very next month, confirming that the vehicle details matched the investigator's description. So I didn't look up if he was intentionally pulled over. I'm assuming so. If they were hot on his trail and they just wanted to confirm, they probably, had a blowout and wanted to make sure that all the details matched. They very, very meticulously cleaned that car, or heated, I guess I should say, but they still searched it. And he cleaned his apartment and deleted a lot of his purchase history, so the purchase of the knife in particular. His behavior was very consistent with someone with knowledge in forensic science as well. We'll see that he has some experience in that. I'll go into that in a little bit. So after all of this evidence that they gathered, they, pull him over, they confirm the car details and all that stuff, and they finally arrest him on December 30th, 2022, so only a month after the crime is committed. Not bad. I don't think that's that bad, but again, could he have been caught sooner? I don't know. He was arrested at his family's home in Pennsylvania by FBI agents armed with the familial DNA and the confirmatory Q-tip DNA. So they had everything they needed to confirm that he did it. So who is Bryan Kohberger? Well, let me tell you. So Bryan was born November 21st, 1994 in Pennsylvania. He earned an associate degree in psychology in 2018, later a bachelor's in psychology and cloud forensics, and a master's in criminal justice from DeSales University in June 2022. Yikes. So in the fall of 2022, he began his PhD in criminal science at Washington State University, nearby Pullman. So he has a lot of experience in how to especially commit these kind of crimes, so that's terrifying. He worked briefly as a security officer prior to pursuing advanced degrees. He didn't have any documented history of violence before the Idaho murders, but investigators and later reporters drew parallels to like incel ideology and misogynistic tendencies, which is all some very big red flags, especially from a person who is in the criminal justice field. Noting unusual stalking behavior, such as monitoring the victim's home and dining area, plus purported drug use and troubling interactions with women. Again, red flag. Red flag. In the weeks before the murders, his phone pinged near the victim's house about a dozen times, suggesting surveillance or stalking, though no formal past complaints from the victims had ever existed. So, was he stalking them? I think so. I think he was planning out this murder. Why? Again, I don't think we really know. Did he have an alibi? So the defense stated that Bryan Kohberger's attorneys stated that he was out driving alone the night of the murders. And this was a habit of his that he normally did to avoid being present at home at the time. Did he have a bad home life? I don't know. Most of these guys do, so I wouldn't be surprised. However, there was a digital contradiction to this. His phone signal cut out from 2:45 to around 4:45 a.m., aligning with the murder window, right? So he purposely turned off his phone and then turned it back on. A sign of premeditation as well. The cell phone tower pings placed him back in Moscow area by 9 a.m. the same morning. So Moscow is like the town that University of Idaho is in. So this is where all of this takes place, right? So he definitely tried to cover up and knew that if he turned off his phone, it wouldn't be able to be traced. But obviously the lack of data kind of says a lot as well. So there wasn't an initial connection to the victims made at first. There was no evidence that they actually knew each other. Attorneys for the victim families confirmed that the students had never heard of Bryan Kohberger before. However, there are a lot of shared public spaces and overlapping academic social circles in the Moscow area. So it's possible that they did cross paths informally and we just didn't know about it or have record of it. And like I said before, was there a motive? No confirmed motive from Bryan that we know of. To date, prosecutors have not established any personal connections between Bryan Kohberger and the victims. He has no romantic, no social, or academic relationship with them. However, it is a possibility that they had crossed paths and, he just singled in on them and started stalking them, and who knows what's going on in that brain. Prosecutors argued that the act was premeditated. He purchased the knife months earlier and surveilled the residence beforehand, but why he committed this crime remains a huge gap in the case. So it was premeditated, but why? Why do any of this? It doesn't make any sense. So, January 4th of 2023, this is where he is extradited back to Ohio and booked at the Lada County Jail. And then in April of 2024, this is where the court agrees that Bryan Kohberger did not stalk the victims on social media, at least. But, there is still speculation that he stalked them elsewhere. In June 2025, so just last month, the defense won a venue change due to all of the publicity of the case, and the trial was scheduled for August 2025 in Boise. However, July 2nd, 2025, Bryan Kohberger pleads guilty to 4 murders and burglary, avoiding the death penalty. Okay. Judge Hippler sets sentencing for July 23rd, so in just a few weeks. So, what do you guys think about him pleading guilty? I really want more details from a trial, right? I want to know if there's a motive, if he's sorry. Maybe they'll come out with the sentencing, but why? Just why any of this happened? And so I'm a little disappointed that there's not going to be a trial. However, I am grateful for the families that they don't have to go through a trial. And some of the family members feel differently, right? Some of them wanted a trial and felt like it was a cop-out for Bryan to plead guilty, but others felt like they didn't want to go through a huge trial. So I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I want justice for the victims, obviously, but maybe him pleading guilty is just the best way to get that justice. Who knows? So one thing that I did want to mention was this case was huge on social media. Platforms like TikTok and Reddit were a double-edged sword in this case. They offered a lot of leads, but also fueled a lot of rumors and misinformation. Moscow PD cautioned that detective amateurs were spreading misinformation, calling it a major distraction in the investigation. There was a lot of things going back and forth of motive and, his history and like all this stuff, right? A lot of misinformation going around. So I just wanted to mention it really briefly. This stuff is quote unquote fun to like dig into, right? And to feel like you're helping out, but make sure that you're doing it in a respectful way and you're not, holding back the investigation at all, right? So when these murders happened, I don't know if anyone remembers, but it was extremely devastating, especially for the University of Idaho and just that student body. There was a lot of hashtags being thrown around, including hashtag Idaho Strong and Justice for Victims trended during this time. A lot of students shared memories and photos and artwork and what the emotional toll of this loss, did on the student body. So I'll talk about a few charities in a little bit, but if you feel led, to support the students over there, I think that's a really good idea and something good that can come out of it, right? So what is next? Sentencing is next. So July 23rd, 2025, this is when Bryan Kohberger faces 4 consecutive life terms plus 10 years for burglary. There is no death penalty on the table. His avoidance of the death penalty continues to provoke public debate and family division. So I think some family members wanted the chance to get even, and some feel like the plea deal was the best way out and some way to get justice without having to go through a painful trial. What do you guys think? Would you rather go through a trial and put the family through that and possibly get a death sentence, or, spare them the agony of doing that, but opting out for a life sentence? Honestly, I think life in prison is worse than death. Death is quick. Life in prison is not so happy and nice, and I think that's a good punishment. But let me know what you guys think. And I know that we've talked about the death penalty and the statistics in prior cases, but again, just remember, 1 out of 25 people on death row are innocent. That's what makes me rethink the death penalty right now. Somebody texted me. Hey. All right, so the University of Idaho gifted degrees to the victims. They built a memorial garden and they have a scholarship fund, that's endowed in honor of the victims. A little about the victims themselves. So Kaylee, she was a senior and she was a general studies major. She was a part of the Alpha Pi sorority and she was from Rathdrum, Idaho. She was best friends and lifelong bond with Madison Mogen, another victim, since the 6th grade. She was known for her laughter, her warmth, and her very strong personality. She had also secured a future job in tech and planned to move to Texas after graduation. Madison Maddie Mogen, she was 21. I don't know if I said Kaylee's age. She was also 21. Madison was 21. She was a senior. She was a marketing major, and she was a part of the Pi Beta Phi, Pi Beta Phi sorority, and she was from Courier d'Alene, Idaho. I'm very positive I said that wrong. Courier oh, it's not going to be good. D'Alene? Yep. Idaho. She worked at Mad Greek Restaurant with Xana, and she ran the restaurant's social media as well. She was a musician at heart and an only child. Her father proudly spoke of her on the Dean's List and concert-going passions, so she was artistic and creative. Xana Kernodle, she was 20. She was a junior. She was a marketing major. She was a Phi Beta Phi sorority girl, and originally she was from Arizona, but grew up in Post Falls, Idaho. She was described as uplifting, positive, and close to her boyfriend, Ethan, who was also the last victim. Her family created the Xana Kernodle Scholarship in her honor, and that is through the University of Idaho. And you can donate to that scholarship, I believe, and I'll tell you where in just a second. And then our last victim, Ethan Chapin, he was also 20 years old. He was a freshman, and he was a recreation, sport, and tourism management major. He was part of the Sigma Chi fraternity. Sigma Chi fraternity. Sorry, I was never part of a sorority, so I don't know how to say any of it. He was a part of a triplet, and he was from Conway, Washington. He was athletic, social, loved sports, and country music, and he was noted as being the life of the party. And he was engaged to Xana. His family launched the Ethan Smile Foundation in his memory. So this is another one that you can donate to. If you want to donate to the Xana Kernodle Scholarship, I believe you can go through the University of Idaho to do that. And then if you want to donate to Ethan Smile Foundation in his memory, you can go to ethansmile.org. And this is a foundation honoring Ethan Chapin's love of life, people, and new adventures by providing scholarships that enable others to follow their dreams. And they just announced the 2025 scholarship recipients. So if you are curious, go ahead and check out their website. It has a lot of information on there. Okay, so like always, I like to end on a quote. So this one is from Benjamin Franklin, and he said, "Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are." This quote reflects the moral urgency that drove public interest and media coverage into this case, as well as the dedication of law enforcement and the families who pushed for answers in the face of unimaginable grief. Stuff like this happens every day, all around the world, and it's hard to kind of get lost in the mix, right? But this was such an outrage, and the families made such a big deal out of it, which they should, right? And the student body, it just drove public interest so high that I think it helped solve this case even faster, right? Put pressure on law enforcement. So I wish every case could be like this, where, you know, they find the perpetrator relatively quickly and everyone gets quote unquote justice like they should, but that doesn't always happen, right? And sometimes people just don't care. And I'm here to tell you that you should care. You should care with every single instance of this. It doesn't matter what race, what sexual orientation, what age, what, you know, it doesn't matter. Like, we should be outraged every time something like this happens and someone's life is taken that, you know, it shouldn't happen. Should never happen, but unfortunately it happens every day. So I hope maybe you can be a little bit more maybe aware. And Jasper, you want to say hi? Oh my God. interrupt me again. Interrupt me again. And I'm gonna pet you. Can't threaten you on camera. Alright, go on. Okay. Jasper won't go away, so I guess he's going to be a part of this. So I'd like to go over the piece I did for this case, and it's a lot different than I normally do, and I really don't like this one. I don't like how it turned out, but you know, every piece has beauty in it, right? And this is watercolor. Well, it's like watercolor marker and a little bit more marker, and I really don't like watercolor. I'm not sure why I subjected myself to that, but anyway, so this is a Camperdown elm that I did, and it's very distinctive, right, because it is featured on the University of Idaho's campus, and they're known for their unique upside-down appearance due to their weeping branches and contorted trunks. So I wanted to kind of pay a tribute to the victims in a way where it's, you know, their alma mater and something that stands for University of Idaho and stands for, you know, life and renew and new beginnings and that kind of thing. So I hope that you find this piece inspirational, and this goes out to the University of Idaho students. If you want a print of this, just let me know, and you can order one today if you like. Alright, so that was my coverage of the Idaho College murders. I'm sorry, each one of these is just so depressing, but I tried to, at the end, I tried to make it positive and something that we can learn from each case. That's what I'm trying to do here, is try to bring a little light to this dark, dark world that we live in. So I hope that you can appreciate that. All right, guys. Well, I hope that you liked this case as much as I love putting them together. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like and comment this video. That way you will never miss one of my terrible yet inspirational stories. And I will hopefully see you in the next one. Be kind to one another, be kind to yourself, and go out there and be good people. All right, guys. I will see you in the next one. Bye!